Europe has always been viewed as a beacon of stability and progress, but not all countries on the continent are thriving in 2025. In fact, several nations are facing crises that threaten their economies, political systems, and even societal harmony. From staggering debt to rising unemployment, these countries are on a downward spiral that could lead to significant upheaval. Today, we're uncovering the top 10 fastest collapsing European countries in 2025. Each one faces unique challenges, but their struggles share one thing in common: they're shaping a future fraught with uncertainty. And before we get started, don't forget to subscribe, like, and hit the notification bell so you never miss out on more engaging content. Let's explore the reasons behind their decline. Number 10. Greece. Greece is no stranger to economic instability, but 2025 finds the nation once again teetering on the edge of financial disaster. Despite years of austerity measures and international bailouts, the national debt remains at an alarming 189% of GDP. These unsustainable levels have left Greece vulnerable to market shocks and unable to invest in long-term growth. Unemployment remains a persistent issue, especially among the youth, with nearly 25% of young Greeks struggling to find work. This brain drain has led many skilled professionals to leave the country in search of better opportunities abroad, further weakening Greece's economic potential. Tourism, one of Greece's economic lifelines, has also faced challenges. Global uncertainty, climate change affecting seasonal patterns, and increased competition from neighboring countries have all contributed to declining visitor numbers. This reduction in revenue is straining local businesses and government budgets alike. Greece's infrastructure is another weak point, as the government has struggled to maintain and modernize its roads, public transport, and utilities. Power outages and unreliable public services are becoming increasingly common, eroding public trust in the government's ability to deliver basic needs. Social unrest is on the rise, with frequent protests in cities like Athens and Thessaloniki over corruption, wage stagnation, and the high cost of living. These demonstrations often turn violent, further destabilizing the country's fragile political environment. The government has tried to enact reforms, but public resistance and bureaucratic inefficiencies have slowed progress. International creditors continue to demand austerity measures, leaving Greece trapped in a cycle of debt and economic contraction. Unless Greece can find a way to boost economic growth and address its systemic challenges, the nation risks another financial meltdown that could have ripple effects across Europe. Number 9. Italy. Italy's economy is the third largest in the Eurozone, but in 2025, it's also one of the most vulnerable. A national debt exceeding 145% of GDP, coupled with sluggish economic growth, is placing immense pressure on the government to stabilize its finances. These challenges are compounded by political infighting that has stalled meaningful reform. One of Italy's biggest issues is its aging population. With one of the lowest birth rates in Europe, the workforce is shrinking, leaving fewer taxpayers to support an increasing number of retirees. This demographic crisis is placing a heavy burden on the country's pension and healthcare systems. Youth unemployment remains stubbornly high, hovering around 20%, which has led to a growing wave of immigration. Young Italians are leaving the country in record numbers, seeking better opportunities elsewhere and exacerbating Italy's talent drain. The nation's banking sector is another area of concern. High levels of non-performing loans have made it difficult for banks to lend, stifling economic growth and innovation. Small and medium-sized enterprises, which form the backbone of Italy's economy, are particularly affected. Italy's infrastructure is crumbling, with poorly maintained roads, bridges, and public transport systems causing disruptions and accidents. High-profile incidents, like the collapse of Genoa's Morandi Bridge in 2018, continue to serve as stark reminders of the country's neglected infrastructure. Social and political instability is growing, with the rise of far-right and populist movements creating divisions within the country. These tensions are undermining public confidence in the government's ability to address pressing issues like immigration, public safety, and economic reform. Without decisive action to address its structural weaknesses, Italy risks falling deeper into economic stagnation and political instability, threatening its role as a key player in the European Union. Number 8. Ukraine. Ukraine continues to face immense challenges in 2025, as the country struggles to recover from years of conflict and economic hardship. The ongoing war in its eastern regions has devastated infrastructure, displaced millions, and drained national resources. Reconstruction efforts remain slow and underfunded, leaving vast areas in disrepair. The economy is in dire straits, with inflation running rampant and foreign investment drying up due to the unstable political climate. Corruption remains a significant barrier to progress, with widespread graft undermining public institutions and deterring international aid efforts. Energy security is another pressing issue for Ukraine. The nation's heavy reliance on imported energy, coupled with frequent disruptions in supply, has led to rolling blackouts and rising energy costs. These challenges are impacting businesses and households alike, further deepening the economic crisis. Social tensions are high, as citizens grow increasingly frustrated with the lack of progress in rebuilding and reforming the country. Protests in major cities like Kiev and Lviv have become more frequent, reflecting widespread discontent with the government's performance. The healthcare system is struggling to meet the needs of the population, with hospitals underfunded and medical supplies in short supply. This has left many Ukrainians without access to essential care, further eroding public trust in the government. International support remains crucial for Ukraine, but geopolitical tensions have complicated aid efforts. While some nations continue to back Ukraine financially and militarily, others remain cautious due to the ongoing conflict and instability. Ukraine's path forward is fraught with challenges, and without significant international cooperation and domestic reform, the country risks becoming a failed state. Number 7. Latvia. Latvia, a Baltic nation known for its rich culture and natural beauty, is facing significant challenges in 2025. Once a growing economy in Eastern Europe, Latvia now grapples with stagnation as inflation and unemployment climb. The country's GDP growth rate has slowed to just 1.2%, leaving many questioning its long-term economic prospects. A major concern is the rapid emigration of its working-age population. Since joining the European Union, Latvia has experienced a steady outflow of young and skilled workers seeking better opportunities elsewhere. This has created a labor shortage, making it difficult for industries to grow and leaving an aging population behind. Public services in Latvia are under increasing strain. Healthcare facilities in rural areas are underfunded, and access to education is unequal, with schools in smaller towns struggling to meet modern standards. This disparity has widened the gap between urban centers like Riga and more remote regions. Corruption and bureaucracy remain persistent issues, deterring foreign investment and slowing economic reform. While the government has made some efforts to combat these challenges, progress has been slow, frustrating citizens and businesses alike. Transparency International's Corruption Perceptions Index ranks Latvia lower than most of its Baltic neighbors, highlighting the scope of the problem. The country's energy dependency is another critical issue. Latvia imports a significant portion of its energy, leaving it vulnerable to price fluctuations and supply disruptions. Recent efforts to diversify energy sources have been limited in scope, failing to address long-term vulnerabilities. Environmental challenges also loom large. Urban pollution and deforestation are growing concerns, with limited government resources allocated to sustainability efforts. These issues threaten Latvia's natural beauty, which is a key draw for tourists and a source of national pride. Without addressing these systemic challenges, Latvia risks falling further behind its neighbors in terms of economic development and social stability. The country must act swiftly to retain its workforce, modernize its infrastructure, and restore public trust in governance. Number 6. Belarus. Belarus faces significant challenges in 2025, as international sanctions and political isolation continue to take a toll on the nation's economy. Following the controversial 2020 elections and ongoing political repression, the country remains under the authoritarian rule of Alexander Lukashenko. This has led to strained relations with Western nations and reduced access to international markets. Economic stagnation is a major concern, with GDP growth remaining sluggish and inflation eroding household incomes. The state-controlled economy is heavily reliant on Russia for trade and financial support, leaving Belarus vulnerable to external pressures. Sanctions targeting key industries, such as potash and oil exports, have further crippled the nation's financial stability. The government's crackdown on dissent has led to widespread human rights abuses, with political prisoners still detained and independent media silenced. These actions have alienated Belarus from the international community, limiting foreign investment and aid. Public infrastructure is deteriorating, with insufficient funding for maintenance and modernization. Transportation systems, utilities, and public services are under strain, leaving many citizens frustrated with the lack of progress. Energy dependency is another issue, as Belarus relies heavily on Russian oil and gas imports. Rising energy costs and supply disruptions have led to increased living expenses, further burdening the population. Social unrest is simmering beneath the surface as citizens grow increasingly discontent with the lack of political freedoms and economic opportunities. While protests have been suppressed in recent years, the underlying dissatisfaction poses a long-term threat to the regime's stability. Belarus's future remains uncertain as it faces mounting economic challenges and growing isolation from the global community. Without significant reforms, the country risks deeper economic and political collapse. Number 5. Bosnia and Herzegovina. Bosnia and Herzegovina remains one of Europe's most fragile nations, grappling with political divisions, economic stagnation, and social unrest in 2025. The country's complex power-sharing arrangement, established by the Dayton Accords in 1995, continues to hinder effective governance. Ethnic tensions between Bosniaks, Croats, and Serbs further complicate decision-making, leaving the government paralyzed on key issues. The economy is struggling, with high unemployment rates exceeding 15% and limited opportunities for young people. Many Bosnians are leaving the country in search of better prospects abroad, contributing to a significant brain drain and further weakening the nation's economic potential. Corruption is a pervasive issue, with widespread graft undermining public institutions and deterring foreign investment. Efforts to address corruption have been slow and ineffective, leaving citizens frustrated with the lack of accountability. Infrastructure is outdated and in desperate need of modernization. Poorly maintained roads, unreliable public transportation, and limited access to clean water and electricity are common complaints, particularly in rural areas. These deficiencies hinder economic growth and reduce the quality of life for residents. Social services, including healthcare and education, are underfunded and poorly managed. Hospitals lack essential supplies and equipment, while schools struggle to provide quality education. This has left many Bosnians feeling abandoned by their government. International support remains crucial for Bosnia and Herzegovina, but geopolitical tensions and donor fatigue have limited the impact of foreign aid. The country's slow progress on EU accession has also dampened hopes for a brighter future. Without significant reforms and a commitment to national unity, Bosnia and Herzegovina risks further economic decline and social instability in the coming years. Number 4. Albania. Albania faces mounting challenges in 2025, with economic instability and political dysfunction threatening to derail its progress. While the country has made strides in tourism and foreign investment, persistent corruption and poor governance continue to hold it back. Widespread mistrust in institutions has left many Albanians skeptical about their future. Unemployment remains a significant issue, particularly among young people, with rates hovering around 20%. This lack of opportunity has driven many Albanians to emigrate, contributing to a brain drain that depletes the nation of its most talented and ambitious workers. Remittances from abroad make up a substantial portion of the economy, but they cannot compensate for a stagnant domestic job market. The country's infrastructure struggles to keep pace with modern demands. Poorly maintained roads, unreliable public transportation, and frequent power outages have become common frustrations. These issues are particularly detrimental to the growing tourism sector, which relies on functional infrastructure to attract and accommodate visitors. Healthcare and education systems are underfunded and fail to meet the needs of the population. Hospitals often lack essential equipment and medications, while schools suffer from overcrowded classrooms and outdated materials. These shortcomings contribute to widespread dissatisfaction among citizens. Corruption continues to plague Albania, with allegations of graft and mismanagement undermining trust in the government. International organizations have repeatedly called for reforms, but progress has been slow, leaving the country vulnerable to further instability. Environmental issues also loom large, with unchecked deforestation and pollution threatening Albania's natural resources. The government has struggled to enforce environmental protections, further exacerbating the country's vulnerabilities. Without meaningful reforms and investment in key sectors, Albania risks falling deeper into economic stagnation and political instability, jeopardizing its aspirations for European integration. Number 3. Montenegro. Montenegro, one of Europe's smallest nations, is facing significant challenges in 2025 that threaten its economic and political stability. The country's heavy reliance on tourism has made it particularly vulnerable to global economic shifts, with visitor numbers declining due to rising prices and competition from neighboring countries. This downturn has left local businesses struggling to stay afloat. Public debt is another pressing issue, with Montenegro's debt-to-GDP ratio exceeding 80%. Much of this debt is tied to large infrastructure projects funded by Chinese loans, leaving the country heavily indebted and dependent on external financing. Critics have raised concerns about the sustainability of these projects and their long-term economic impact. Corruption remains a major obstacle to progress, with allegations of graft and nepotism undermining public trust in government institutions. Efforts to combat corruption have been slow and ineffective, further damaging Montenegro's reputation among potential investors. The healthcare system is under strain, with limited resources and poorly equipped facilities struggling to meet the needs of the population. Many Montenegrins are forced to seek medical care abroad, adding financial and emotional stress to families. Political instability has also grown, with deep divisions between pro-European and pro-Serbian factions causing frequent disruptions. Protests and strikes have become more common, reflecting widespread dissatisfaction with the government's handling of economic and social issues. Montenegro's environmental challenges add to its struggles, as the rapid expansion of tourism and infrastructure projects has taken a toll on the country's natural beauty. Unregulated construction and pollution threaten its iconic coastal areas and national parks. Without decisive action to address these issues, Montenegro risks deeper economic decline and growing social unrest, jeopardizing its long-term prospects. Number 2. Serbia. Serbia is facing mounting challenges in 2025, as economic stagnation and political tensions push the country closer to crisis. High unemployment, particularly among the youth, remains a persistent issue, with rates exceeding 17%. This lack of opportunity has driven many Serbians to leave the country in search of better prospects abroad. The nation's political climate is fraught with tensions, as divisions between pro-European and pro-Russian factions continue to deepen. These conflicts have stalled progress on reforms needed for Serbia's EU accession, leaving the country in a state of limbo. Protests and strikes have become increasingly common, reflecting public dissatisfaction with the government's direction. Corruption is a significant problem, with allegations of graft and nepotism undermining trust in public institutions. Efforts to combat corruption have been slow and ineffective, deterring foreign investment and hampering economic growth. Infrastructure in Serbia is aging and in desperate need of modernization. Poorly maintained roads, unreliable public transportation, and inadequate utilities hinder economic development and reduce the quality of life for citizens. Healthcare and education systems are also underfunded, with hospitals and schools struggling to meet the needs of the population. These challenges have left many Serbians feeling neglected by their government, further fueling social unrest. The country's energy sector is another area of concern, as Serbia remains heavily reliant on coal for power generation. Rising energy costs and environmental concerns have prompted calls for a transition to renewable energy, but progress has been slow. Without significant reforms and investment, Serbia risks deeper economic stagnation and growing social divisions, jeopardizing its aspirations for a brighter future. Number 1. Hungary. Hungary finds itself at a crossroads in 2025, as political tensions and economic challenges push the country toward instability. Prime Minister Viktor Orban's government faces growing criticism over its authoritarian policies, which have strained relations with the European Union and reduced access to vital funding. The economy is struggling, with inflation running high and wages failing to keep pace with rising costs. Many Hungarians are finding it increasingly difficult to afford basic necessities, leading to widespread dissatisfaction and protests in major cities like Budapest. Corruption is a persistent issue, with allegations of graft and cronyism undermining public trust in government institutions. These practices have deterred foreign investment and hindered economic growth, leaving Hungary's economy in a precarious state. Hungary's healthcare system is underfunded and overstretched, with long wait times and a shortage of medical professionals. Many citizens are forced to seek care in neighboring countries, further straining household finances. Education is another area of concern, as the government's centralized control over schools has led to a decline in quality. Teachers and students alike have protested against underfunding and outdated curricula, demanding urgent reforms. The government's stance on immigration and human rights has drawn criticism from international organizations, further isolating Hungary on the global stage. This isolation has reduced opportunities for cooperation and investment, exacerbating the country's challenges. Unless Hungary can address these systemic issues, the nation risks deeper economic decline and growing social unrest, threatening its position within the European Union and its future stability. These 10 European countries are facing unprecedented challenges in 2025, with economic instability, political strife, and social unrest threatening their futures. Will they find a way to overcome these obstacles, or will their struggles continue to worsen? Let us know your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more insights on global trends. Thank you for watching, and stay informed.